Thanks for tuning in. Just a friendly reminder, our producer, Abuh Monday's book, Written in Legos, the hardcover of that edition is now out, so be sure to check it out in the link in the description below. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast, where every week we're in conversation with folks who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all which bring you just one step closer to that feeling of hope. I'm your host, Neil Trivedi, and today we are going to be in conversation with Wannessa Badger, who I believe is the creator. Let's see, you have so many credits to you, so let's see if I get this one. You're the creator of the Cycle Breakers Club, which we'll certainly get into about what that is and how you came about. You help women around the world with mother wounds. I know you have a degree in child development and so much more. You're a tapping expert and so many things going on. But yeah, that's as succinctly as I can put it. But yeah, welcome, Wannessa. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate being invited to share this space and this container with you and to speak to a shared audience, our community, really. I really resonate with the community that you're connected with, and I just humbled and grateful to be here.
Yeah, if I'll give a little shout out to our mutual friend Taylor, because she was the one who recommended you after I had her on my podcast, and then we became friends. And she's like, are you familiar with Wannessa's work? And I was like, well, not until very recently. We just started following each other then. And she was like, oh my God, you gotta have her on the podcast. Like, she's awesome. And I'm like, done. So here we are.
I love Taylor. She's amazing. Right. I love her work as well. She's such a love warrior, and she's just doing amazing work in the field of healing for the community.
Absolutely. One of the best ever. So let's, if you can explain a little bit of your background and, how you came to do what you do and why you do it, get into that a little bit for our audience.
Okay, great. Yeah, so where do I begin? Let's start with college. Yes, I got my degree in child development and family studies, and really what led me to studying that, I feel like it was a degree in inner child healing and shadow work. Because when you explore and dive into the development of a child on all levels, biological, cognitive, emotional, physical, even looking at anthropology, looking at how families from all around the world, looking at cultural family strengths and weaknesses, you really start to develop a perspective and an understanding of why your childhood was so impactful, whether it was positive or negative. And you ask yourself a lot of questions, especially going into family studies. When I studied that, I had to really ask myself, okay, well, I see why this was dysfunctional in my family. I see how it impacted my development, my sense of self, my sense of self-worth, my confidence. And then asking myself, how can I make changes? What can I do different for the next generation? Because I knew I wanted to have a family. I knew I wanted to be a mother. And also self-healing, right? How can I heal my inner child? So that was the degree that I got. And I really enjoyed that. So now moving forward, I still had a lot of healing left to do. So as I journeyed along, being the type of person that I am, researching, studying, I am definitely a self-healer. I love to figure out how I can transform my own limitations. And it started actually when I was 10. I had a spiritual awakening that I've talked about before. And I realized, I realized that I was walking around with shame and that I was putting on a smile, but that I was actually not really happy inside. And I just didn't know it. It was almost a dissociated state, just going through the motions. And I questioned this. This was kind of intuitive shadow work that I did, where I asked myself, okay, where is this coming from? And I realized it was from my childhood trauma, even earlier trauma. I was only 10, right? So I still had more to experience, but I started exploring that. Then I realized I had this vision of myself as separate than my trauma, that I'm so much more, that I saw myself as a spiritual being having a human experience as a child of God. And that no matter what we've been through as children of God, nothing in this realm can ever take away or harm our light and take away our purity, the purity of our spirit, right? And I think that as survivors, it's common, I'm just going to say it out loud, it's common for us to feel like we're dirty, that there's something wrong with us, and that there's like people can see something like that happened. And so at least I've connected with a lot of survivors that feel that way. So really connecting with that beautiful vision and recognizing myself in my purest form of love and light and a child of God, as I mentioned, that really helped me on my journey to start exploring what that means. And so I went into studies in high school, but then after college, I still had flashbacks that I was dealing with. And I still had a lot of resentments and anger that I had towards my mother that I was determined to try to break free from, and I wanted to heal. So I started exploring alternative modalities, and I got trained in, so let's see here. I got trained in emotion code, was one of my favorites. Pranic healing, which is energy healing, because there's an element for healing. It's not just the mind, it's not just our emotions, our physical body, but also we're energy, right? We're energy and matter. So really the energy healing, the visualization, the power of the mind, really working through my chakras and my aura, all of this is really meditation too. And we're going to talk about this, but with meditation, you start to train your nervous system. You start to reprogram your nervous system for calmness and safety. And as survivors, we have such dysregulated nervous systems that happen just out of survival. And so that was a big piece of the journey and why energy work is so important to me. So emotion code, NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, theta healing, certified in mindfulness and compassionate communication coaching. So just I feel like there's more, but I just bring all the pieces of the puzzle together when I support a fellow survivor and a fellow human being. It's really just about being in the moment, intuiting, how can I be of service here? So a lot of times last thing I'll mention is a lot of times it's just so helpful to just listen, to have someone to actively listen and hold space for you. That's the presence is I feel the most nurturing and loving. So that's really the best medicine to offer.
Yeah, totally. I've can say that even in my personal experience, like I used to have this background where like when my friends or somebody was struggling, my natural instinct was, oh, I want to try to fix it for them. And then I realized over time, because I also have clinical depression, I realized in my own journey, that's not my role. My role is to be there for somebody in the way that they need me to be, not to be this savior, because only you can like save yourself, if I can use that word. It's like, but holding space is like one of the most valuable things you can do, and just show up and say, okay, I'll listen if you want me to. I'll give my 2 cents if you want, but how do you want me to be? And I figured out like that's probably one of the most effective techniques ever when you're trying to help somebody, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's definitely a sign of wisdom that you've developed on your path of service, and realizing, wow, if we can give each other space to just have a place to let go and to get it out, that's really a majority of the growth that's needed. And so then, and when we're invited to share some ideas or perspective, that's when it really goes, that's really when it really permeates and can create a difference.
You mentioned like earlier on that one of the most common things for survivors is, right, they feel dirty or they feel like it was their fault because that's the way that probably the circumstances have conditioned them to think that way. Society, especially the patriarchal society, has conditioned them to think that way. What was probably, and was that the biggest misconception that broke for you after you started studying child development and went in that direction? What are like one or two major things that you really thought, oh my God, all my life as a survivor, I've been thinking this, but it's really this? What are a couple of big things like that for you?
Okay, great question. So there's a couple. One has to do more with my mother wound as opposed to that was so I feel like the inner child healing and the shadow work that I experienced in college was really more about generational trauma and the parenting and the the dynamics of the family. And so I will say, as a sexual trauma survivor, what I did notice and what I did learn was it's generational. It's usually it's not just one generation. It's often brushed under the rug, and it depends on your
Yeah.
culture. And so the secrecy that happens. So one of the biggest things that I brought into my parenting is that there are no secrets. We don't keep secrets in our family. That's poison. Secrets are poisonous. Like, for instance, my mother at one point just innocently was like, "Oh, I have a secret for you," or I told my son a secret. And when he said, "Oh, Nana told me a secret," and he said it in front of my mother, I said, just very calmly, I said, "You know what? We don't keep secrets in our family because secrets are unhealthy. We have everything out in the open because children are manipulated, can be very manipulated as a child, being told this is a secret. We're not going to tell anyone, right?" And that's where that emotional, psychological manipulation happens. And it really F's with our mind, right? And I hate to
Yeah.
use
Oh,
like
yeah.
such strong language, but it is such a mess to clean up and untangle and figure out, and
Yeah.
it can take a lifetime, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to take a lifetime. With
Yeah.
diligent perseverance and courage, it can be untangled and reprogrammed. So that's one piece. Another one was self-compassion for myself, realizing I rebelled in my teen years, and I was really angry and I was really resentful. And so through the inner work I discovered, and through learning about child development, I discovered the patterns that happened in my childhood that equated to me rebelling. So I'll elaborate. My mother was very controlling. She was an authoritarian parent. She had very strict rules. She didn't give me a lot of freedom. And it's interesting because she wanted to protect me. Her heart was in the right place. She wanted to protect me. It still didn't protect me, right?
Right.
So as I got older, I was also a parentified child, which a parentified child is a child that is given responsibilities that are not age appropriate. And so there's two ways of being parentified. One can be physical, like the child is made to do, tasks around the house, is made to start providing for the family at a young age. There's different ways that in the physical sense a child can be parentified. Then there's the emotional side where the child is made out to be a therapist for the parent, right? And so emotionally holding space and listening to their problems. You see this happening with parents that are emotionally immature as well as narcissistic, or even that
Yeah.
have an addiction, unhealed trauma of their own. Maybe they're an alcoholic, or they have anger issues and they do a lot of mean things, and then they're saying they're sorry afterwards, and they're putting all this responsibility and this emotional burden on their children, right? So
Yeah.
I was a parentified child. My mom started telling me stories of her trauma when I was 5 years old. So I started holding space for her at a very young age.
Wow.
Yeah. So I I kind of grew up being an active listener. I holding space,
Yeah.
listening to people's stories. People would tell me their stories, and I think it's just because of this lifetime or this childhood that I signed up for, being conditioned in this way to listen. And I do love stories, and I gravitate towards people, and I want to hear what they have to say, and what it was like for whatever it may be. But for a child in that sense, I would say that it was very frustrating for me, and I'm going to tell you why. And you might relate. I appreciate you holding space for me here too. I was I felt very alone. And that's what happens with parentified children. We have to take this role, and it's like, okay, who's my caregiver? Who's my mother or father? Who do I go to unburden my frustrations? Who's checking on me? And
Yeah.
as a teenager and a late teenager, so 18, 19, 20, I moved out early, and I had no one ever checking on me. I was paying for rent. I was taking care of my bills. I was paying for college. I was going, but no one checking on me to see, how are you doing? How can I help? Um, every time my mom would call me, it was about her problems. And so I started to get really frustrated with that. And so I realized what a parentified child was. But the rebellion, let me get back to the rebellion. When a parentified child is given all this responsibility, but then given no freedom,
Yeah.
there's hypocrisy that's seen, and children are really great at calling out the BS. Okay, so we see it when we see hypocrisy as children, and we as children see hypocrisy. Okay, you said this, but I'm seeing this. This doesn't add up. We start to
Right.
take note, and we start to see when people in authority, people who are supposed to be caregivers or teachers or whatnot, we start to see, okay, that person's lying, or that's not honest, or what, that doesn't make sense. So what is the truth? So as I
Right.
started getting older, being the second mother of the family, just feeling so confined by my responsibilities and no freedom. For instance, I could work and be out till about 11 o'clock at night, taking the bus home from very far away, because I worked through high school to pay for my school. But
Right.
I but if I wanted to go out on the weekends with my Christian friends, I had to be home by 8:30, 9 o'clock. And it just didn't make sense to me. Well, the movie
Right.
starts at 9. My friends were having dinner, we're hanging out, we're going to do our makeup together, and oh no, you
Yeah.
can't go. Every time I wanted to go do a dance, even in middle school, I went to a very small school. Everyone in the class is getting ready for this dance, this Halloween party, Christian school.
Yeah.
It was a no. I would beg. I'd clean the house spotless. I would kiss her, kiss up to her. I just did everything possible because I wanted to be a part of the fun. Everyone in the class
Yeah.
was going, and she would do this. She would tell me I'm not going until the very last minute. She would then say, "Okay, you can go." And then she went from being the oppressor to the hero. It was emotional
Yeah.
manipulation that happened. So
I,
all of these little things came into place, and then my spirit rebelled.
yeah.
And I ended up rebelling. I ended up going through a whole phase, still being responsible, but I always had shame for that when I was in college. I had shame for being this rebellious child, and I just wondered why did I do that? It's just not in my nature to be like that. And so when I learned about child development and how it's very organic for a child to have so much pressure on them and responsibilities with no freedom and oppression, to then oftentimes rebel. Not all rebel, right? There's different
Yeah.
ways of handling, but for me, I rebel. This is not fair. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do I'm gonna
Yeah.
do my thing then. I'm gonna sneak out the window, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
go to the party. Because I believe I deserve it. This is, me 16 years old. So I
Yeah.
made sense of a lot of my behaviors and the ways that I coped with childhood trauma in college, to answer your question. Long-winded answer, but
Oh no. We like that here. We love the details because that's how the layman who hasn't studied, right, would understand, is when you give like part background, part examples. So I love that actually. One of the things you mentioned, like, that trauma is generational, and we did like an entire episode on just that. I remember having an expert like who talked about it can even be, or not even start in the womb as early as, and go back generations. But how the other side of that, where do you draw the line of, say, parents or guardians who engage in certain behaviors, abusive or otherwise bad behaviors, and we say that, well, oh, that's because the background they came from was that this way, right? So if a father is brutally beating his child, oh, well, his father used to beat him. That's why he did it. Or I know, like, listening to past interviews of yours, like, I know from your father's side, there was alcoholism in the family and all kinds of issues. So where do you draw that line of, okay, well, that's all they know versus personal responsibility?
This is a personal answer to that. I mentioned, and because I can build on what we've already shared, or what I've already shared here, I can build on this to answer this question. My mother, as I said, I was her therapist from a young age. She would tell me all her problems, and I got to a point where I started giving her advice. I would give her advice on how to handle her situation. Yet she would still keep doing the same thing and then complaining about it. So she'd have this problem. I'd give her advice. I'd listen to her. Then she would go about her business and handle the problem the same way and then complain about it again. And it was just this ongoing loop. And it really made me think, like, what is going on here? So I learned, and she would say, she would blame it on her childhood. She would blame it on the past. Well, you don't know what I've been through, and it's because of this, and just kept giving excuses for the past. And so from a young age, I made the decision that that's not going to happen for me. I'm not going to spend my life blaming who I am and what I do on the past. And I would tell her, you have the power. You have a choice. It's at some point in your life, you have to decide, you have to know, well, I should say, you have to decide that the past is no longer going to control who you are. You can learn from it, but continue to grow. Our brains fully develop by the age of 25. So from a child development perspective, I would say by the time you're 25 and your brain is fully developed, that you can start looking back on your childhood, you can start doing the inner work, take a look at your patterns, maybe even younger. Maybe it happens for you later. I'm not quite sure. That's just from a child development perspective. But regardless, you cannot blame the past on who you are today. I had a client who was trying to give an excuse, justify a father's behavior, saying, oh, he didn't grow up with a father, so he doesn't know how to be a father. He has his issues. And I brought up my brother because I'm like, no, that's not fair to say that, because I have my brother who didn't grow up with a father, who he was not able to handle his own trauma. Yeah. He arose to the occasion. My brother is an amazing father. He learned what he did not want to do. He did not want to be like so many fathers that don't show up. And he shows up, he provides, he's emotionally present. I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of my brother. And my father, he allowed his past to keep him from enjoying this life. That's what it comes down to is, are you going to let the past rob you of your happiness? Are you going to let the past continually be a block and a hindrance to your magnificence, your potential, your ability to enjoy this life? And it requires inner work, again, courage and perseverance, but it is possible. You just have, the first step is making that decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that part then, the healing part and, grounding. And where does this start? Like, I would imagine, obviously, people say, oh, therapy, or find someone like you to, hook up with and learn and, get to know. But where does that healing journey start? Is it like admitting to yourself, okay, I've been through this and I need to work through this to come out and not let it define me, that realization, that epiphany moment? Where would you say the healing process begins?
I always say start where you are. So if something's coming up for you, that's where you start. If you're noticing that there's a pattern that keeps happening and you don't like it, or you find yourself getting stuck in the same place and you're wondering why, that's great. Start asking why. That's where you start doing the inner work. That's the shadow work. That's just the access point to being able to explore and understand yourself more. But
Yeah.
before that, what's always helpful is learning how to self-regulate. So for anyone who's been through trauma, childhood trauma, any type of trauma, our bodies, they get programmed to easily go into survival mode. And you can get into all the different types of nervous system activations and whatnot, but we have to, as survivors, train our nervous system to be able to understand and recognize calmness, to be able to regulate when we're feeling triggered and we're feeling activated, to be able to give ourselves a sense of safety. That's one of the first things that's so important before starting a journey and diving into it. Because if you start questioning what's going on and you know that the answer is going to trigger you even more, what's going to happen? Your body's going to start, the heart rate's going to start, you're racing, you might go into anxiety, or you might want to just, like myself, sometimes escape, and you go into depression. You just want to go to sleep or be in your bed and just escape the world, right? So being able to give yourself that sense of safety, breath work, that's huge, right? Being able to recognize, okay, I'm feeling triggered right now. I feel my heart starting to raise, my mind is starting to go and think negative thoughts and go into fear. And so being able to come into the present moment, breathing, and then maybe visualizing or using self-talk. There's so many different strategies for being able to calm your system down, but the most powerful is our breath, right? One conscious breath can create the shift that you need to then start doing other little strategies.
Right.
And I'll say to that too with the grounding, because you mentioned the grounding. So self-regulation, regulating, bringing yourself back into peace, bringing yourself into balance so that you can be objective. Mm-hmm. But grounding is so important. That's another strategy, because as survivors, we're practiced. Our body is practiced. Our minds are practiced to be out of our bodies. We dissociate. We might numb ourselves, or we did when we were younger, or we get really into our heads and we're not present. We're not in our bodies. And I was mentioning earlier to you that our culture also encourages us to be separated from our bodies, right? With television, okay? When you're watching a movie, when you're watching TV, when you're going through social media, you're not in your body, you're all in your head. So practicing to be grounded and being connected. Let me tell you what grounding is too, for those who don't know. Grounding is sinking in and feeling the gravity, the pull, the presence, and the support of Mother Earth. Getting in your body, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling that heaviness. That heaviness is a beautiful thing when we can feel the weight, and we feel it in our bellies, right? When we ground ourselves, we come into the body, we feel that this well-being in our bellies. Our breathing is calmed. Our minds can become clear. We focus on our breath. And we're present. We're in the present moment. And that's what can alleviate our anxiety that might be going into the future, the depression that's fueled from the past. We can come into this space, into this loving presence that Mother Earth offers us, and into this beautiful body that we were gifted.
Yeah, absolutely. You also, can you explain for our audience, the term shadow work has come up a lot in this conversation. So for the layman out there, can you explain what that is exactly?
Yes. So shadow work is being willing to inquire deeper. So one popular way of conducting shadow work is you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Okay, then ask yourself why again. And then why again? Keep going. This is from the founder of Toyota, actually. He, as a CEO, Someone would bring a problem to him, and he would ask
Right.
why 5 times, just to get deeper and deeper and deeper to find the root of the problem. He would never be satisfied. Okay, what's the problem? And then go for it. Then attack that problem. He would ask why, so he can get to the deeper problem. What is the core issue here? And so by doing that for ourselves, we're able to access the subconscious mind. We're able to access the subconscious emotional wounds or limiting beliefs that are actually driving our behavior, because we are actually only conscious of 5% of what we're thinking and doing. 5%. Wow. Yeah. So unless we inquire, we're not going to figure it out. We're just going to think it's our fault. What's wrong with me? Why can't I fix this? It's because you're at the surface level. So asking yourself certain questions, doing some journaling, there's more to it, and it can be really fun because you start to understand yourself more. You connect these dots, and it's in that moment that you connect those dots that you have a moment of enlightenment. See, enlightenment is not just one, it doesn't just happen once. It can happen thousands of times in your lifetime. The moment you're enlightened, you bring light to the shadow. The shadow work is what's in the shadows, right? You bring a light to it. It's nothing to be scared of. You realize, okay, this makes sense now. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I am the way that I am. Okay, I want to change that. That's when you have your power to change, because you know, you don't know what needs to be changed or what the problem is, and how are you going to solve it, right? So that's the beauty of shadow work. And there's many different types of strategies, and I do have a shadow work process that I teach in a course that I have that's a lot of fun, just to keep it simple, because I'm all about simplicity and effectiveness and power. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated in order for it to be transformational.
Yeah, and that will be, we'll get into that in a minute, like about what you do and the Cycle Breakers Club and all your practice and what all you offer. But before that, I wanted to, can you touch on the fact, one of the things that I keep reading, like on social media nowadays especially, is people say healing is not linear, it's never a straight path, right? Even when you're doing good. And a perfect example, that's why I think you're the perfect person to explain this, because as I know, for many years now, you're successful, you have a wonderful partner. I know it's 15 years and going and all that, and everything is especially compared to where you came from, everything is so good. And yet I would imagine no life is ever perfect, right? Even after you heal, even after you get through certain things, there's going to be triggers that might come up randomly from the past. Maybe you'll see something, maybe you'll come in contact with an older acquaintance, whatever. So can you go into that significance of how that's okay? Sometimes I know I go through this a lot where, wait a minute, I thought I was doing so good. What just happened? Why did I have this bad of a day emotionally when I was doing so good?
Oh, such a beautiful, deep question. Beautiful. Yeah. So we have so many layers within us. And the journey is really coming back to our true self. So yes, the healing journey, it's going to fluctuate. There's going to be ups, there's going to be peaks and valleys, and it's all because of our purpose to heal, right? Our body. So we sometimes get upset with our body for not work. We think it's not working with us. We're like, why am I getting triggered? Why is this happening? Yeah. Our body is a compass. It's actually the strongest access, the most reliable access we have to our subconscious mind. When we're triggered, it's because something is coming, something wants to be healed, something is calling to be healed. Everything within our body strives for homeostasis, strives to be calm, everything in balance. When something is not in balance, that's when it calls for our attention. The same thing is for our emotions. Okay, so our bodies also hold our emotions. It's been proven that our memories are stored at the cellular level. Okay, so when the body or the subconscious mind, right, or even the non-conscious, at the non-conscious level, there's 3 levels, there's even 4, but the non-conscious level, if there is an emotional wound that we're from the past that hasn't been dealt with, there at some level it's being dealt with within our system. Yeah. So when we get triggered, it's our body letting us know, hey, there is actually something that's been causing turmoil, and we'd like you to handle it so that we can come back to homeostasis. I also believe that when we don't attend to our emotional wounds and we don't listen to our bodies, that things just kind of start to manifest even worse for our physical body. So what starts off as energy and emotion, if it's not dealt with, and this is also something that's taught in Chinese medicine, that it can start to affect not our lungs, but our lungs is usually grief, but our organs. It can show up as ailments in our organs. It's because there's dis-ease in our system. And we're not just a physical body, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, we have an energetic body, a spiritual body. These are aspects of ourselves. We're multidimensional, right? So looking and attending to all the pieces. I'll tell you, when I thought that I had healed so much. I had been with my husband, beautiful time already. I forget how many years. We had our firstborn child. Yeah. I had thought that I had healed my sexual trauma. After giving birth to my firstborn, my world was rocked because I went to go pick up my baby, my newborn baby, out of his crib, his bassinet, to feed him, and I had this flashback of me being pulled out of my bed, not as an infant, but as a toddler, in the middle of the night from my abuser. And I apologize if it's triggering anyone. Take a deep breath, ground yourself. Okay, we're holding space for each other. Part of us speaking our truth, okay, is part of us all healing. Yeah. So I was very shocked. I couldn't pick my baby up because my entire nervous system went into fear and disgust, and my stomach turned. And this is in the middle of the night. This is probably 3 o'clock in the morning. Right. And it blew my mind. So I took it slow. I grounded myself. I took a deep breath. I gave myself patience. I stepped away. I didn't force myself to pick up my baby and nurse him. I gave myself a moment and I took note. Like, okay, all right. There's something there that still needs to be healed. I'm like, goodness gracious, another layer to heal. What else is there? What else do I have to deal with? But you keep going, and you grow from it. So every time we're faced with another piece, another time we're triggered in our healing journey, there's ebbs and flows. It's because at a soul level, we still have more to grow from. We still have more to heal from, to restore our self-love and our compassion, and really healing our entire system. There's a lot of layers with childhood trauma. That's why it's a journey. It's not linear because there are so many layers, and it's not until we have certain experiences that might recall us to the past that our body's like, oh yeah, hey, remember that? Yeah, we still need to deal with that. Yeah. It's still causing some resistance in your system. So with that, I went and started exploring more healing modalities to figure out how I can let go of those flashbacks. And I will tell you, emotion code was what worked for me. I had 3 flashbacks that would haunt me, where I would get triggered and it would come in my mind, and I would just go and just shut down my mind. And I tried so many strategies. Like, I would breathe and definitely ground myself, so I wasn't going into panic or anxiety or needing to go to my bed and crawl into a ball. But I could still see it there, and it was just upsetting, and it would cause me anger. And I would imagine it. One thing that worked in the moment for me with the flashback is I would imagine it lighting on fire. I would just first I would say cancel, delete. So tell my brain, cancel, delete. And then if it wouldn't go away, then I would imagine almost like a picture, like one corner would start to catch on fire, and then the whole picture would light on fire. And then it almost cleared. So then I could move on, but I would still get triggered with these flashbacks. And again, I told you, I'm a determined self-healer. I don't want
Right.
to live a life with having to deal with flashbacks. So I
Yeah.
found a motion code along the way, and I had success with healing these flashbacks. They're just neutral. I don't feel anything. And once I experienced that, I had to learn how to do it myself. So then I got trained in it and certified in emotion code because of it. Uh,
Yeah.
but I hope that answers your question from my perspective.
Totally.
Okay.
Right, totally. And I love that. Just a little side note, I can really relate to that imagining the fire thing, because one exercise that my counselor tells me often to do is, if I'm feeling like really bad emotions, fear and anger and frustration and whatnot, he's like, he told me this technique where he said, like, okay, write it first of all down, because you have to acknowledge it before it goes away, like acknowledge it. And then he said, tear up the pieces of paper. So that's kind of similar to how, like, the visualization, except he said, like, tear it up or burn it, take a lighter and like burn those bad emotions. And then what you have left with is, if you had positive ones that were trying to creep in but couldn't, because then you're left with those. So that's just a psychological technique. I was reminded of that when you mentioned that. So yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
powerful. I have done that as well, where I write down everything I was feeling and I rip it up, or and light it on fire, or I bury it, bury
Yeah.
those, those tearings. And it's the brain loves symbolism. It loves visualizing. We can't so using your mind to create positive feelings, visualizing your inner sanctuary, visualizing letting it go, or however, get creative, because
Yeah.
no one's going to create a solution for you as far as visualization as
Right.
powerful as what you can create with your own mind, right?
Yeah.
So intuit, and that's part of going back to getting back into the body, grounding, self-regulation, creating safety for yourself. Okay, that's inner child healing, because
Yeah.
your caregivers and your household didn't create safety for you to anchor into and to know and to recognize. It wasn't memorized by your body. Your body memorized and is automated for survival and being
Yeah.
uneasy and always being on alert and hypervigilant. So we have to, as survivors, practice memorizing what it feels like to feel safe, and doing that for ourselves is part of us bonding with our inner child, giving ourselves, it's becoming that loving inner parent that can give
Yeah.
that to our inner child. And
Yeah.
so all these ideas are, like I said, they're so wonderful, and it's so powerful when we share them with each other.
Yeah. And yeah, with that, let's transition into what you're doing now. I know you have so many of those ideas and you're teaching others as well through your practice. And so tell us, how did the Cycle Breakers Club start and what it's all about?
Okay, yeah. So Cycle Breakers Club, it started with other survivors of childhood trauma that really were making that decision that I'm not going to let my past rob me of my happiness. I'm not going to let it be an excuse for how I live my life, or an excuse for how I raise my children in the next generation. So
Yeah.
it's not just, cycle breakers are not just parents, but it's about deciding I'm not going to let this cycle continue on, as I've seen other family members allow the cycle of trauma to continue on and have them destroy their lives or rob them of their happiness, right? And their potentiality. And
Right.
what does that end up creating? It's just a domino effect for feeling less satisfied with your life, less self-love, lower self-worth.
Yeah.
So Cycle Breakers Club came out of that. And so now where I'm at is because I'm constantly growing, constantly changing. That's
Yeah.
just who I am, figuring things out and following my own intuition along the journey, and really encouraging and supporting my voice, the inner child that wants to speak and wants to share and has ideas. So I'm also on the journey, and it's never going to end, right? But
Yeah.
where I'm at now is I have a course, and so the school, I don't know how many courses are going to be a part of the school, but the school is life story medicine. And the idea is that we have our life stories, right? And so how can we transform our life stories
Right.
into, from wounds into wisdom? And it's possible. And so I work a lot with the subconscious mind. I work a lot with energy and the emotion, really the emotional body, because emotions are energy in motion, right? We feel it
Yeah.
well up in our system. We sometimes we're like, I can't put my finger on it, but I feel it. I feel it here in my gut, or I feel it on my heart, or I feel this pressure. And so putting words and giving a voice to the parts of our experiences that can't really be explained. So I work with that. And so this course it teaches how to figure out where you're stuck. So it helps those who are feeling stuck with their mother wound. So really it's going to be focused, I'm going to focus a good amount of time on those with a mother wound, healing the
Yeah.
mother wound. And so where are you feeling stuck? Teaching about, one, I do teach about some child development, family dynamics, parenting styles, roles that we played. How did that impact your sense of self, your confidence, your sense of self-worth? So helping you understand the why. Okay,
Yeah.
that's one piece. And then we go into where you're at, diving in, shadow work. I teach a very powerful but simplified process for discovering the root of the problem, going over emotional wounds. What are the 4 different types of core emotional wounds? And then we go into the transformation pieces, what is really the medicine. So how do you self-heal? How do you create an inner bond with your inner child? So that's the
Yeah.
biggest piece for me, is creating that inner bond with yourself, so you're not reaching for others to give you that sense of security and that safety.
Yeah. Where can people find that, like how to join, as well as your own like social media links and all that?
Thank you. Okay, so right now I'm also taking one-on-one sessions. I'm doing one-on-one sessions, and they are an hour to an hour and 15, depending on what we need. And I'm doing one-on-one sessions and seeing, offering my, the tools that I have to offer, and the medicine that I have to offer, and holding space, of course. And the course is also available on my social media, Wannessa Badger. There's a link in the link tree. There's a link for booking a session. There is a link for the course, if you're interested in the course. And there's a link to to a podcast. I post once a month, probably. And I feel like there's something else on there, but I can't remember right now.
We'll link it. We'll link it in the description when this episode comes out. So
Okay,
hopefully, yeah, everyone should be able
awesome.
to check. How about, like, I guess we could end with some, because we always say hope and awareness is what we try to bring with people struggling out there with mental health issues. So what message would you give to, say, survivors who are still in that beginning stage of realizing what just happened to them, what they've been through? They've not maybe about to start their healing journey, but maybe not quite yet. Just somebody who hasn't come to terms with it yet about what they went through. What message would you say to them right now?
Okay, I would say this, or I'll say this. When you start to feel that way, and you may feel like you're starting to get scared, or your nervous system, as we talked about, starts to go into high alert, and you may feel like you're about to panic, take a deep breath, one conscious breath, okay? And then place your hand on your heart or on your belly, or give yourself a hug somewhere where you know, or maybe you got to put your hand on your forehead or hold your cheeks, do something soothing. For me, I like to place my hand on my heart and say this to yourself: I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Say it again. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And if you feel a well of emotions, allow yourself to release, because it may be
Wow.
something you haven't told yourself in a long time and that your inner child needs to hear.
Wow, I love that. So beautiful. I'm actually gonna try that. Like now, if I feel triggered, like I'm gonna try that because that seems like it covers so much, like holding, comfort, physical comfort, emotional comfort. It's just yeah, wow, it's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. By the way.
Absolutely.
Um, well, this has been, like I said, such a powerful conversation, and I'm so glad. This episode was so much more than I even hoped. I mean, I knew it would be good because, I'm familiar with your work and stuff, but I didn't realize it would be this powerful and this great. So, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me and asking such meaningful, deep questions. My heart really shared a lot here, and it was therapeutic for me too to be able to share pieces of my story and the way the I connected the dots and where I'm at today. So thank you as well. Thank you everyone else here who stayed here till the end and enjoyed our conversation too.
All right. Well, have a good day.